Singer, welcome to the Wellness Lab. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this. Very
Of
excited.
course, of course. I think we should let people know that we're both part of the Camp Robin Hood family, but I mean, you more so than me. But I was really delighted to hear that going through your professional history, you have a really impressive career as an OT. So how'd you get into that exactly, in both of these fields?
Huh. Well, Camp Robin Hood is a family-run business, and so my parents started the business, and then when it was time for me to choose a career, they decided that camp is a great career to have, but you have to have something to fall back on. And because Robin Hood has always felt strongly about inclusion, I thought that it was a good complement to become an occupational therapist. So I went to school for that, missed 1 year, my only year that I've missed at camp, to do my last practicum. And then I've been at Robin Hood ever since and able to use the skills I've learned as an occupational therapist to bring them into our camp setting as well as other camp settings, actually internationally. So I'm very invested in making sure that camp is accessible for all.
Of course. So from both of these fields together, is there a unique insight you have into young people, neurodivergence, mental health that you've gotten from both of these professions?
Yes, actually, with regards to being an occupational therapist, I worked with lots of children who had physical and developmental needs as well as mental health needs. And we recognize that we all have our strengths and limitations. So every summer we hire close to 300 staff. And we also recognize that as you and I have our strengths and limitations, so do some of our staff and campers. And so by helping people recognize where their strengths and limitations are, and being able to modify or adapt the program, everybody gets the most out of their experience.
Mhm. And how would you recommend someone identify strengths and weaknesses? Because that's a really useful thing to know in terms of regulating your own thoughts, feelings, behaviors.
So I think that, well, first of all, our application process in any business, especially in Ontario, actually mandates that we should be putting onto the application process somebody that they can actually reach out to or share some of their strengths or limitations right from the get-go. And it isn't something that would cause them not to be considered for the job, but something that we as employers would make sure that we could support them in their journey as a staff member at camp. So we also recognize in the type of training that we do at camp that people learn differently. So some of the training may be more visual, some of the training's more hands-on, etc. So we're trying to look at all the different learning needs that people have and how to best support them. But I also think it's important that people are transparent with us with regards to, if they do have some mental health challenges around anxieties, etc., they may already have some very well-established strategies that we could use at camp, or their supervisor may be able to help them out by noticing if somebody's getting a little anxious by describing what they look like when they get anxious, so that a staff member could say, hey, or their supervisor, can I take this group for a little walk, and why don't you go and grab a glass of water and we'll meet you over here in 5 minutes, etc. So we're able to put some more systems in place for people. It stops the burnout too. It helps people
Absolutely.
learn, grow, and feel comfortable so that they can keep growing in our setting.
So you develop these, learn from others, developing these list of strategies, ways you can manage it, and then I love that having that support person, identifying that person early. Is there what's the danger, do you think, from not, for someone who doesn't have a young person who doesn't have that support person, being like that this is someone, or this is a group of people who knows me, knows how to be receptive, supportive, inclusionary.
I think if they haven't been upfront with us, I mean, that person may be presenting in a certain way where other people may make an assumption that they're behaving in this way, not recognizing that there's something else going on behind them. So at camp, we always, and hopefully in life, we always want to be curious and ask great questions and be able to support. But we have to also depend on the other person to give us the information and the cues so we can support them. But when they don't do that, sometimes, you're going to have that burnout, because there are some staff in the past where we've given a Wednesday off because it was just too much work for them to be able to do that full week of camp without kind of filling their bucket in the middle of the week. So there are certain strategies we can put in place. Otherwise, sometimes people find it so hard to even get up in the morning, they may not even want to come back to work. And we want to make sure that they come back to work and that they're feeling fulfilled and successful in their experience.
Absolutely. And you mentioned someone who's going to make an assumption, who's going to see how that person's behaving, maybe the way they think, etc., and not fully understand it. So for someone who isn't as informed as yourself, what's a challenge that a young person who's neurodivergent might face that will fly under the radar quite easily?
Yeah, well, I think that sometimes reading social cues or reading the room can be an issue sometimes. And sometimes, too, people can be impulsive. And so they can be very reactive. And we're hearing more and more about people having big emotions. And that could be that they take the world in a very, they feel things very strongly and then they react very strongly. They don't have necessarily what I like to call the brakes to be able to put the brakes on and be able to assess the situation and think about what's the best response in this setting. So sometimes somebody who's neurodivergent doesn't always have that ability to put the brakes on, to see the bigger picture. And I always say that perception's reality. So sometimes what happens is people perceive a situation in one way, that's their reality, but it may not be the way most people would typically perceive what's going on around them. And so it's often great to have that extra person there that they feel comfortable with, to be able to bounce like, I felt this way, and then that person could say to them, or their supervisor could say, yeah, well, when I noticed it, I thought maybe some people would take it in this way instead. And so there's some clarification that can happen there. I also think, like in our setting, we're a very big, wide open space. We have lots of things going on in our environment. And I think sometimes that people don't always take that into consideration. So some people get visually overstimulated or auditorily overstimulated. And so that can cause an issue, or distracted. And that can cause an issue too in the setting. And sometimes people's medications that they're taking to help them with their mental health, I often say it's like wearing glasses when the medications are working right. So if I have difficulty seeing, my glasses actually help me see. And now I feel much more secure and grounded and can do my work that I need to do. But those medications sometimes have side effects that we don't always take into consideration. So we've had somebody that was on a medication that couldn't deal with the heat, but they were on swim staff. And so for us, we realized like there could be a better place for that person to be rather than swim staff, because we're in an outdoor setting and the heat and sun was just causing a real havoc with their medications.
Absolutely. And I love that analogy of the brakes, of saying, I'm overstimulated right now, I'm stressed, anxious, whatever it may be, and I am I am less skilled at being able to say, stop, brakes, I need to step aside, get a glass of water, go in the shade, whatever it may be. Just put the brakes on, and then I'm gonna go resume this. Because it's a really that's a tricky thing to know how to do and have the awareness to do, especially at a young age, and even more especially when you might have a neurodivergence.
Yeah, and we actually ask all of our staff now to let us know what their favorite song is, what their favorite snack would be, what their favorite thing would be to actually help them calm down. And we try, if we're having a staff dinner in the evening, we'll try and find some of those cool snacks to be able to give out to the staff. But it's also for their supervisors to know, what can I do to help you? Because some people have different ways that are really calming for them. But if we know already, we ask the staff to really advocate for themselves, because that's what they're going to have to do in life, is be able to advocate and know how to use those tools. And when things get stressful, it's harder to find those tools in your toolbox. So we want them to be able to practice those tools. Camp's a great place to practice. We're looking after other people's children, so we have to be safe about it. But we do provide the support so they can practice those tools. So when you go out into other types of jobs and become parents, caregivers, etc., they're able to use some of those tools as well.
Absolutely. It's a great, just being able to identify that these are the strategies, these are the methods that work for me, having someone to reach out to, all of that really developing a self-management system is so effective and crucial in this kind of space.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is if we can use the team that supports you as a staff person. Sometimes our staff who are neurodivergent in particular, they have a really great support network already of people that know them through the years. So it could be their parent, it could be a teacher, but having somebody or a therapist that they've worked with, that if they give me permission and consent to be able to work with that person, then the three of us could work together as a team because they may have some other strategies and things that can come into place, or we might hit a little bit of a wall, and it may be cool to all brainstorm together about what are the next steps to help them move forward. So using the team that you've developed over the years is super helpful for us too, with consent.
Of course, of course. And then so let's say you were a young person, so like childhood, early adolescent, and you're neurodivergent, you wanted to start being more open about this. How would you recommend, or how would you want that person to communicate their needs, ask for assistance when they need it? What strategy or what approach would you want them to
Ah,
have?
great question. Well, first of all, I think that the term neurodivergence is becoming much more established and known and not such a negative connotation to it. And so people are much more comfortable to be able to talk about it. There's even more and more programs that are coming up where people can practice those social skills with a therapist, a social worker, a speech language pathologist, or an OT like myself. So there's those kind of programs that are out there. I think people, once they share that, it's actually, I think, a little bit off their shoulders, that there's a little bit more understanding. I learn differently. I react differently to things when it gets really noisy in here. So I can give an example at our overnight camp that we spend our weekends up there, our dining hall. Almost 800 people eat in the dining hall together, and we do cheers and dancing, and it's really loud. And so we've learned over the years there's some staff that will just go, and campers, and put on noise reducing headphones so that they're able to better cope in that, or they know that they can take their food, eat outside where it's a little quieter, and come back for announcements. So we are encouraging, and I think by people seeing that accommodations and modifications are being made, that it's not such a negative thing to do. That it is super helpful to actually share, but the caveat is also to be aware of how to be able to share and when to share. So sometimes people overly share or overly rely on their needs, and it stops them from sometimes doing the things that will help them grow and have those added experiences. So sometimes being open to even having that extra support in a setting like a job coach or a one-to-one support, depending on the level of functioning, would be helpful too, because having that extra person there can sometimes encourage them to do more things than they would without somebody there. And that's how we grow, is taking
Absolutely.
safe
And
risks.
identifying your strategies, reflect who are people I can open up to, when's a good time to open up, when's it the right conversation, what situations can I rely on these types of supports, what situations can I rely on these, and all that stuff, and just developing that system of self-management is great. And I like that we touched on stigma as well and being able to just be like, yeah, yeah, I'm neurodivergent, and there's no bearing to that word. I still remember when I was in grade 9 and I told my best friend I had ADHD, and his reaction was like, "Oh, cool. Want to get lunch?" Like it
Exactly.
wasn't like this significant big thing. It was just like it was a very standard, just, "Hey, by the way, I'm gonna let you know." And not
Yeah.
having that stigma and that weight to it just makes it so much easier to say, like, this is my situation, this is how I think, here are my needs, please be receptive and accommodate.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they already love you for who you are, right? This is just an extension to be able to explain a
Mhm.
little bit of, and we all have our little quirkiness. Like I know I have issues with I will never do the transportation at camp because I have different issues with spatial awareness and being at north, south, east, and west and things. So I recognize where my strengths and limitations are, and I'm upfront with people to let them know that. And I've got skills or people or resources that I can now use to be able to help me. Like I love ways, and so also being aware of where your needs are and what are the resources that can best help you to get to that next level.
And then once someone shares their needs, so I think we've established a pretty good base on understanding yourself, learning how to share your needs, etc. It's it's one level to know how to do that. It's another level to do that in the right space. So I'm curious, what does a pro belongingness, pro support environment look like to you?
I mean, we work really from the get-go to help everybody feel that they're part of our camp community. And I would hope that in schools, universities, recreation programs, that people are really putting an emphasis on making sure that people feel that they belong and have a trust with those that are in their community, both peers, but also the people that are running or supervising you or the program, so that everybody's working together and valuing um, what everybody comes to the table with. And so that people can be a little bit more vulnerable, but know that they have those supports there for them when they need them. Um, we do something at the beginning of pre-camp when we're starting to train our staff where we are in, use a lot of intent where our returning staff go in first, but they leave spaces open so no new people coming in are going to be sitting beside somebody that's returning and they don't feel like the odd person out. And so we intentionally find ways, and I think you can look on websites if you're applying for a job or looking for different programs to see and even on our website and the wording that we use to hopefully convey how we want people to feel that they're part of our community and there's a feeling of belonging and we want people to return year after year. So we want to make sure you fit in nicely and value brand new people coming in and people with unique needs coming in too, that we all add to the colored fabric of whatever program we have to offer.
And the two words that just stuck out to me that really kind of perked up were value and trust. These are people around me that I trust. So if something goes awry, I trust that you will be supportive and receptive to me. I trust that I'm included in this space, and I know that I'm valued. I think those were two great words that really capture the feeling of being in an environment where you belong and where people support you, accept you, make their best efforts to understand, etc.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about meeting people where they're at. And so I think that that's a huge thing too when it goes to value, right? And so um, we have different jobs that we've thought out of the box for certain people because we know where their skills are really they've got great skills in a certain area and so we want to focus on that area and bring them into that program. So the more you can share what you value and who you are with your employer or other people, then hopefully they're able to value and place you somewhere where you're going to succeed and thrive. Yeah.
Yeah, and that goes back to knowing your strengths, knowing your limitations, being able to say this is an environment that's tough for me because of XYZ, the way I think, whatever it is, but I know this is an environment that and where I'm strong. And you learn that by reflecting on your needs and being able to identify where you thrive and where you don't. And then once you learn all that, and it's a tough process, but it's so worth it when you can say, okay, this is my environment, I'm good here, and then that feeling when you're in the right space and you're thriving is amazing.
And sometimes the environment isn't the right fit. I mean, y'all look for different types of universities. Each of my kids had a different university that kind of clicked for them. every environment's going to be a little different too. And so there's that balance of, is this the right place for me? Even with the adaptations and modifications, I recognize not every place can be everything to everyone. And the other thing I often say to people too is that life doesn't happen in a vacuum. And that's really hard too. Sometimes when we've got neurodiversity, especially around anxiety and things like that, we like to have the structure that's there that helps keep us grounded. We want to know what's coming up next, etc. So you can put all those strategies in place, but for some environments, it's a little bit harder to have that kind of control over the setting. So it may not work for some people.
Hmm. And how would you were a young person, neurodivergent, how would you recommend they find their space, their environment, so to speak?
Yeah, that's great. I often say to families and to young people too, like, where do your interests lie? Like, there are some kids that do really well instead of a traditional program like mine, like at a debate club, because they're really bright and gifted, but they have that quirkiness to them. They may find other people that have very similar interests to them. Dungeons and Dragons, Lego, being outside in nature, finding a nature camp. Like, it just depends where your interests are, and then being able to look for those kind of things that bring you joy. But sometimes it's good to go outside those favorite activities to, but I think you'll find more people that might have similar interests to you by exploring those interests.
Yeah. So that's a great little reflection practice that someone can do is just identify what your interests are and then go look for environments where there are going to be people who share those and you can feel comfortable in that space. And I love that you also brought up expanding out of that because what you as great as being in a right space is, you can't just stay huddled in that space. So you could go find your space, find your comfort, find your support, and then you can start to branch out from that and go experiment and elsewhere. Maybe you find a new interest, another environment, another space where you feel you belong and you can thrive.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the way you build resilience, right? It's like building a muscle. So you
Hmm.
got to practice it and try it out, and then eventually you will, and having those right supports around you will help that too. Yeah.
Hmm. And what would you say is the importance in terms of finding your people when in terms of whether it's trusted adults or peers when someone who's neurodivergent and they might struggle with the idea that they're different, so to speak.
I mean, I think there are some programs that are specifically for people that are neurodivergent, and I don't think that's a bad thing to try out some of those programs too, because sometimes you can feel like you're alone on an island. So you could have been going through school and maybe you've never met somebody else who's shared that they have an attention deficit disorder or they have autism or anxiety, and meeting somebody else and seeing how they're thriving and handling life, and maybe they're hitting some challenges too that you can learn from. So sometimes some of those specialized programs do help to see and meet some other peers and learn from them as well and their supports. Does that help answer that question?
It does absolutely. So in terms of just finding you know how to learn your needs, learn what environments you thrive in, and just being able to develop that self now that self understanding and you know how your own brain works. You know how you think and you know how to and that helps so much to learn how to manage it in any setting.
Yeah, and but also being able to then advocate when you do need help, feeling
Hmm.
confident enough to be able to ask for that help, because we don't always know exactly, like, it's good to sometimes lean on professionals and lean on different people too to continue to learn and improve oneself. We all
Hmm.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah,
We
and
all
that
take
and that
courses
acts
in
as your
different things too.
mhm. And that acts as your base that you can kind of spring off of, so to speak. And this is where you're comfortable. This is where you know you belong. And then it's a yeah, secure base is a common idea in psychology where this is your space where you're comfortable, you feel safe, and then you can use that to learn, develop, understand yourself, and then move out from that, go explore. And that's such a key thing when someone's trying to make sense of themselves, especially in when you're a when you're a young person, and especially when you're a young person who has to develop this understanding of this extra thing that's neurodivergence.
They're dealing with. Yeah. So that foundation, you build your foundation, and then you learn how to put in those breaks and things that are happening within your day so you're able to cope. Because the worst thing to do is have all these stressors all day long, and then you get home, and that's where you explode because that's the place you feel most comfortable with. So you want to be able to know what are those strategies and breaks so that you're being proactive and taking care of yourself too, because you need to know what are those calming things to be able to build in within your day so you're not what I call like a wet noodle when you get home.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then as individualized as that can get, because everyone has their own no two are alike, everyone has their own strategies of putting on brakes. Do you have any stories of someone who has developed their own and learned, okay, this is what my brakes are in a particularly interesting way that you think is generalizable?
Yeah, so I think, well, for example, that we had a staff member that worked in one of our activity areas and just found it really challenging to be on. And camp is a very stimulating environment. And she knew that she was just exhausted by the middle of the week. So she's actually the one that said to us, do you think I could take Wednesdays off and then come back Thursday, Friday and be more refreshed? So we do have staff that we're able to, or we'll say to them, they say, I have so many questions. And we're like, okay, what can we do about all those questions? Because they pop up and they can't put the brakes on. So we've had a staff member that journals things. He writes down the questions as they pop into his head, but he doesn't have to blurt them out at that exact moment. He has a moment at lunchtime where he can then say to his supervisor, these 5 things popped into my head. Can we talk about them now? Which has
Mhm.
been super helpful. Or if they have something that they get stuck on, which sometimes we do, and people that are neurodivergent do sometimes, and not as flexible, that there are things that we can say, okay, let's talk about it at this time, or let's talk about the rules of the game. Like sometimes people like to change them up, etc. But finding those moments and building those moments into a day when they can have a check-in with their supervisor or a
Yeah.
trusted person have
Yeah.
helped.
I love how you phrase that as well, building them into your day, being able to say, okay, I know this is the time I'm going to start feeling like a wet noodle. I'm going to start this is when the burnout or the fatigue or the anxiousness, whatever it is going to set in around this hour. So I'm going to put in a little a break there. This is a way of putting on the brakes that I know works, that I know is effective for me and also works in this environment, and just developing it's has some similarities to almost like a schedule of just knowing when your needs are, when to put on the brakes, how to do it, yeah, all of that. And then
Oh,
you
can I jump in just there with
absolutely please
medication?
do.
Because sometimes medications will suppress your appetite.
Oh,
And so
that's true.
sometimes what happens, or disrupt your sleep, right? And so sometimes we'll say to staff too, or a camper, why don't you have extra snacks with you? I know you're not going to feel hungry for them during the day, but you're going to be really hungry when your meds start to wear off. So let's make sure that you schedule those kind of snacks or whatever during the day so it's not as impactful when the meds start to wear
Right.
off and you're starving kind of thing. So it's thinking
Absolutely.
ahead.
And managing medication is another layer to it, because it's one thing to say here are my needs. It's another thing to say I'm neurodivergent, here are my needs. It's another thing to say I'm also have this medication, and that's something else you have to get habituated to
Yeah.
and learn how to manage. And so and it's a tough process for anyone, and especially for a young person to say to have this medication. It's gonna alter kind of your habits, maybe a little bit of your disposition,
Hmm.
that kind of thing, and knowing how to regulate that is a tough thing to learn.
Yeah, and also being aware of how it impacts you. Like
Mhm.
if it impacts you to the point that you're a zombie and you're on swim staff and you're responsible for supervising kids, then
Hmm.
that's information to give back to your doctor, depending on the setting, right? Because every setting's going to present, you're going to present differently in. So that's another really needing to be self-aware. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, yeah, that's another layer of difficulty to it because it's quite an arduous process of learning what medication works. You try one and then you're hyper bouncing
Yeah,
off the wall. You try another, you're a zombie, and it's a tough process. And that's another example of a time someone needs to articulate their needs, say, I might be a little bit more like this week, so just get ready for
exactly.
that. I might need you to do this, and just being able to articulate that it's such an important skill.
Yeah.
And
And it's
then
all comes down to advocating. Yeah.
it really does. Advocating is a major part of it. When I first learned I had ADHD, and the quite honestly, the word I think I heard the most for those couple years subsequently was, "Are you advocating? Are you advocating? Are
Mm,
you saying to your teachers? Are you saying to this person? Are you saying to your supervisor at work when you're starting your first job and all that stuff? And just, are you advocating? Are you letting people know? Because once you do, if you're in that right environment, they will be receptive and it will work out so much better."
yeah. And it goes back to your health professionals too, right? And the team of supports you may have
Hmm.
that way too. Be able to talk about this is working for me or it's not. I need more strategies. So being able to talk to your therapist or like the doctor to be able to say these meds, I got this feeling, I've got this side effect. Like you're responsible because we're not living inside you to be able to
Hmm.
let us know as health professionals how we can help you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, as amazing a discussion that is, I think just boiling it down to like advocating and all the parts around that, I think is really key. And then just before we sign off here, I have one more thing I'd like to get out. So,
Okay.
what is the one piece of wisdom you'd want a young neurodivergent person to know when they're trying to become comfortable with their mind and themselves?
Hmm. Great question. Um, I think it's looking to the people that you connect with and trust and making sure that you have those right supports for you to be able to lean into because they want to be there to help you be safe and successful, but they can't do it unless you have that connection. So really trust those people. They want to be there to help you. And just yeah, I wish everybody good luck and support is there for you. Just you got to find it and then use it and recognize the people that value you for who you are.
Mhm. Recognize the people that value you, understand your connections. Amazing. So, unfortunately, I think we're gonna end it there. It was a great discussion. I think that was really helpful. I'm so happy to be doing this with you. It's an honor to have you as my first guest.
Aw. Thanks for thinking of me and
Of course.
amazing podcast. I hope it'll help those around you. Yeah,
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. All right.
pleasure.